This is Eric Brotman, the host of Don't Retire, Graduate, a podcast that asks you what you want to be when you grow up so you can graduate into retirement with a purpose and a passion. Welcome to our Diary of a Financial Advisor segment, where we interview financial advisors about their professional journeys and their passion to help others succeed. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by BFG's own Andrew Harrell. Andrew, welcome to Diary of a Financial Advisor.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
So let's begin with the story of how you got not only into this business, but how you became a member of the BFG team, because it's timely.
It is. So I have actually known nothing else but BFG. I've worked here my entire career. And matter of fact, 7 years to this day is when Eric had first reached out to me to come interview. So it's been 7 years to this point. I reached out and we got connected, and I started here about 10 days after I graduated and haven't left. So Eric and I have gotten to know each other pretty great over the past couple of years.
So Andrew, you more than anyone here, and we have 20 folks here, more than anyone here, you got to work side saddle with me for a long time, for better or for worse. Let's have a little fun. In what ways was that better, and in what ways was that worse?
I consider myself pretty smart from that perspective, because you're known here as one of the best. Don't want to blow up your ego, but from the worst standpoint, I will say not having the exposure to other advisors and seeing different tactics. But I know your way, and your way has been working, so I'll give you a lot of credit for that.
So we're going to talk today about your specialty area, and your specialty area is primarily retirement and income planning. Nobody knows the IRA world better than you do, I think. And so when you think about retirement and income planning, a lot of times people think, well, that's something you do when you're, 5 years to retirement. You're 55 or 60 or 65 or even 70. And not to put you on the spot, but you're a young man for that to be your specialty area. What drew you to that specific specialty area within the firm?
Mainly, most retirees these days always have that in the back of their mind. They're always concerned about running out of money. Have they saved enough? Are they spending too much? What's going to happen to Social Security? Some people have mortgages and things to take into consideration, especially with taxes, depending on what type of assets they have, whether it is IRA assets at ordinary income or if they have other property like capital gains property. So trying to balance that with required minimum distributions, Social Securities, and if they have pensions, and fitting that into their world to make a picture for them work and be comfortable.
So there are a number of different strategies that can be used for retirees to derive income. And, what I tend to teach folks is that it's based largely on the required withdrawal rate. And that, rules of thumb I don't like. Everybody's got one, but unfortunately, a rule of thumb is going to be an average, and averages don't work. It's like one size fits all garments don't fit any of us, right? Especially you're very tall. So
nothing fits me.
So if we're looking at that withdrawal rate, and we're looking at the different strategies, when your withdrawal rate is under 3%, and when I mean withdrawal rate, I mean for every $1 million you've been able to amass, that creates $30,000 at 3% of income. All right. How it's taxed is a different animal, and you're right. There are lots of things to think about there. But if your withdrawal rate is 3% or less, am I correct that your risk of running out of money is quite small, so long as you're managing it correctly?
Yeah, I mean, that is a very sustainable rate of withdrawal. Some would say that you could do a total return strategy and just say, I need a 60-40 allocation for my portfolio, and it needs to generate more than 3% to just live off the dividends and the interest, and allow that to continue to grow and keep up with inflation.
So that's one strategy, and that's ideal. That is, if we've been working with somebody for 30 years and they've done the things they need to do, and where they've just showed up on our doorstep and they've done the right things and they've built a nest egg and they can survive on 3%, really they're in phenomenal shape.
Yeah, and ideally at that point they can leave a legacy to their children or do other things, whether it's philanthropy or have the flexibility to do so.
So now let's talk about, what if it's not 3%? What if it's 4 or 4.5 or 5? What is the next sort of level of strategy that makes sense? I've referred to it as asset segregation. Is that the language that you would typically use for something like that?
I would. Matter of fact, I got that from you.
Oh, fantastic.
So if it's 4% relatively rate of withdrawal or below, getting to that 3% level, asset segregation would be that strategy, and having different buckets for different types of income to time those accounts utilization. Once you get north of 4.5, and potentially 5 or higher, you have to look at ways to create a different level of income outside of the portfolio, whether that's annuitization or some other strategy that could allow for you to have sustained income for life and not run the risk of tapping principal.
So for a lot of our viewers, for a lot of households, the biggest asset sometimes that people own is their home. Mm-hmm. It's either their home or their 401k in almost every case, right? It's their retirement plan or their home. The retirement plan is going to have required distributions. It's going to be taxed as ordinary income. The house is someplace you have to live. I've often argued that your primary residence is not an investment. It's because it's a cost center. It's the money pit, right?
Yep.
But there are ways to use home equity to help in retirement. And there are a lot of strategies to do that. There's downsizing, there's reversing a mortgage, there's just being mortgage free, which is lovely. Mm-hmm. But what are you seeing in terms of retirees and their comfort levels with tapping or utilizing that equity as part of their plan? Is there still a lot of hesitation and fear sometimes when it comes to that?
Oh, absolutely. Not only does in certain cases it cost a lot to do something like that, but there are pros and cons. It is a favorable option for those that need it. But most times when you start to bring this up, whether it's a reverse mortgage or a reverse line of credit or something like that, where just as an idea or a food for thought, people have a lot of hesitation around that because they don't want to leverage their home. They feel like they've had it paid off, or even if they haven't had it paid off, they don't want to have debt being accumulated for no reason if they can find somewhere else to tap into it.
How do you, as I'm not going to say a new financial advisor because you are experienced now, but as a young financial advisor, how do you get folks who are 20 and 30 and 40 years your senior to have conversations around, for example, aging in place? Like that's a hard conversation for somebody who is nowhere near experiencing that yourself. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, I honestly sit across from them and I tell them how it is. They know just from looking at me, as you just mentioned, that I have never been in that situation. I don't know what that's like, and I couldn't possibly understand it. But having to be sitting there in that moment, looking at them and telling them that, admitting I don't have any experience with that, but what I do have experience in is us as a team here working together. We've seen hundreds of different households go through this, and there is a way to do this together, and we can help them out. I can't sit there and say that, yeah, I've been through this before, because I have. But right. But sitting there, admitting them, telling them the truth. Look, I truthfully don't know the ins and outs of all this, but we've done this time and time again, and we're going to help be your guide through this entire process. We've had other entries in our diary thus far, and people have said it's different when you're on this side of the table. And, you know, as the host of the show and as somebody who's been preaching this don't retire, graduate, the closer I get to where I need to reinvent myself as a professional, the more real it feels. Mm-hmm. The more it feels like, wow, this is not only the right thing, and I believe in it wholeheartedly, but it's harder. It's harder than it looks. Mm-hmm. It really is. It's because we tie our identity to what we do. So when you're counseling folks and helping them retire, it's more than just financial. It's more just, can I afford not to work? I imagine that you're also getting into some of the softer conversations, the qualitative conversations about how people are going to spend that chapter of their lives. Is that something that you engage in on a regular basis? And what does that look like? Yeah, I mean, everyone's different. They have their own form of graduating, whether it's, I want to go sit on the beach 6 days a week and do nothing else, and read a book. Some people want to create a new business and do some consulting or part-time work of some sort just to get them out of the house and stay engaged in the community. People volunteer. There's a wide range of things that you can do. But the whole premise, going back to your Don't Retire, Graduate segment, is getting off the couch, doing something you love, have fulfillment, and have a purpose. And if you do that, you tend to live a much more fruitful and lastful life versus someone who just is a couch potato, so to speak, and doesn't really want to do much else besides that. Because at that point, you're just sitting around doing nothing and you're decaying. So let's talk about generations, because as a proud Gen Xer, I like to beat on your generation, almost like sport. But the generation before us, the boomers, are experiencing some things that we're on our way to. And one of them is the different regimes that affect the retirement process. So my grandparents, your grandparents even, they had pensions. They worked until they were 65, and life expectancy was 72. You know, they worked from 18 to 65.
they had a 7-year retirement and they were dead. So most of their income was coming from the pension and the Social Security. They didn't need to save a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
You fast forward to Gen X. Now, Gen X, there's still some pensions out there for government workers primarily, but rare in the private sector. There's a certain, I think, risk around relying on Social Security. I think there's a risk that it will someday be means tested or change in one way or another. And there's a need to, for the first time as a generation, there's a need to really be on our own and make sure that we take care of ourselves and that we build a nest egg. But the Gen Xers were still, a lot of cases, working in one environment for 20 or 30 years, getting the gold watch. Mm-hmm. Your generation, there is no gold watch.
No.
There's a Timex. It keeps time, or there's an Apple Watch. But there's no gold watch. Now, you guys are free agents in a totally different way. You have to have side hustles a lot of times. In the 50s, one income could support a family of four. In the 80s, two incomes could support a family of four. And here we are in the 2020s. It's hard for even two full-time incomes to support a family of four. And so even thinking about putting money away for retirement when you have all of those other things happening, it's a more and more daunting version. So in your case, as you're seeing boomers retire and you're beginning to start to dabble in some Gen Xers who are thinking about it, and we are a proud group, have you seen changes in the way that narrative happens between folks who are right now 75 and folks who are right now 55? Is there a defined change in that narrative, in your opinion, based on what you've seen so far?
From a savings perspective?
A savings perspective, a philosophy perspective, an understanding of retirement perspective. Are you seeing a profound difference between the generations already in just your neck of the woods here?
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, the boomers right now are used to living off of just their Social Security, and they might have a little bit saved, but it wasn't what they could have potentially had because they didn't think that they needed it. And as things get more expensive for them with inflation and medical costs and everything in between, they're starting to feel a little bit of that pressure. With long-term care not being a factor as much as it was back then to what it potentially is now with those people, having that coverage not in place is a big worrisome for them. That then lends itself down to the group of 50 plus who we're talking to and saying, hey, look, this is like the prime time for you to start to explore, start to think about this type of coverage, because when you want to hang it up in 10 or 15 years, you're going to be glad you did this. Whether you use it or not, it's going to be there for you and it's going to preserve some of your assets. So people start to worry about that. They start to think about it. How do I save enough not only for retirement, but for healthcare costs as well?
So since the advent of the 401k, since defined benefit pensions went away and defined contribution plans became the norm, there's been this theory that if you max your 401k and that's all you do, you're good. Why is that potentially not true?
Because you're capped on your contributions. So if you're maxing your retirement plan every year, which is a fantastic thing if you're able to do that, that only gets you so far. Because your income, whether you have cost of living adjustments or raises every year, it does continue to rise. So if you're putting in, let's say, $23,000 per year and your income's $100,000, your savings rate's 23%. However, if in a couple of years your income's at $125,000, but you're still putting in that $23,000, matter of fact, yeah, you're still saving your retirement plan contributions at the same level, but your savings rate went down, which means you're essentially living on more because your raises aren't going to those retirement plan savings. So you have to make sure that every time you're getting a raise or an increase in pay, whether it's an adjustment of 1% or whatever it is, just a little bit to try to keep up with the same savings rate level that you were prior to keep the maintained lifestyle going.
What about taxes? I mean, we have all these people with these big 401ks now who don't have a lot of tax diversification, and the government's broke, Andrew. I mean, the federal government, the state, we're running deficits here in Maryland. There are the tea leaves, and none of us have the crystal ball, but the tea leaves would suggest that tax rates could go up. Does that change the narrative around the 401k, where it was always make your tax deductible contribution when you're in a high tax bracket so you can enjoy the income when you're in a low tax bracket? Does that even exist anymore in the absence of planning to sort of fail?
I think so. I mean, I think people have varieties of income, but the higher your income, ideally, if you're doing pre-tax contributions, it does help you from a tax perspective. But one could argue with the federal rates being where they're at right now at relatively lower levels, it might almost make sense if you have the Roth option to make those contributions because you're paying taxes now at a lower rate. But if your income is going to be the same or higher in retirement, it does make sense for that strategy. But if your income is going to be lower in those years, it does the Roth make sense for you? The pre-tax contribution, having it at one level and being taxed at either a higher or lower rate later on does make a difference for your contributions today versus your withdrawals later.
So, Andrew, I got to ask you, what is your favorite thing about being a financial advisor for a living? This is your chosen profession. It's not a job. It's a career. Mm-hmm. It's not even a career. It's a calling as far as I'm concerned. What do you love about this?
I love meeting people day in and day out from all walks of life, seeing the different options that they've come to us with, whether they're at the early stages or they're trying to figure out if they can truly hang it up and retire and go on to the next stage. I like to have those conversations and see where people are at and the things that they're dealing with, because not one person or couple or household is the same. Everybody's different. Every plan's different. And seeing every single situation, finding out the right solution for those people and putting a smile on their face and making them feel comfortable really feels like we're making a difference and changing lives.
All right. Well, you can't get off this stage without answering the don't retire, graduate question. And Andrew, I'm going to ask you right now, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Well, I would say Eric Brotman, but I don't know if I want that after 7 years here. But
thanks a lot.
Yeah. What I will say is I definitely want to be an advisor long term. I want to be a part of this company long term, and whether it's Eric Brotman at the CEO level or just helping others grow around me and taking this place to new heights. Continuing to help people along the way is what makes a huge impact and a huge difference for me. So ideally, me 30 years from now, more experience and better looking potentially.
Less hair.
Less hair.
You will have less hair.
I'll probably look like you on that standpoint.
Thanks a lot. You're not getting shorter, Andrew. He's not that much shorter.
They're going to cut that one.
No, nothing. This is going live just as is. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for doing the diary segment with us. It's been fun and keep doing good work. It's important what you're doing. You're changing lives every day.
Appreciate you having me. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all of you for listening and watching today. If you enjoy our show, please subscribe, leave a rating on your favorite podcast platform, share it with your friends and family so they can join you on your journey to financial freedom. If you'd like to send us a topic or idea we may use in a future episode of Don't Retire, Graduate, please post it on our Facebook page or tweet us at Brotman Planning. We'll be back next week with another engaging guest, and in 2 weeks with our next entry in Diary of a Financial Advisor. For now, this is your host, Eric Brotman, reminding you, don't retire, graduate.
Securities offered through Kestra Investment Services, LLC. Kestra IS. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Kestra Advisory Services, LLC. Kestra AS. An affiliate of Kestra IS. Kestra IS or Kestra AS are not affiliated with Brotman Financial or any other entity discussed.